Hey guys, welcome back to Hook with Anime. If you like the video, make sure to subscribe to my channel. Let's begin. Two people walked together in the woods, a young blonde-haired, blue-eyed man that looked to be about 19 years old. His clothes were torn, covered in dust and dirt, his skin stained with dried blood. The other was an unnaturally pale woman with milk-white eyes, though her inhuman appearance was exacerbated by a vertical slit on her forehead and broad horns on top of her head. Like him, her clothes were also torn and dirty, her skin muddied by her own dried blood. "We're here." The young man stumbled forward. "But there is no destruction," the woman said as she collapsed underneath a tree. "Perhaps the beast is asleep or sealed somewhere." "It must be, it has to be, or else we're screwed." The young man sat beside her. "This place is peaceful, there are even birds here, that's a good sign." Why would birds be a good sign?" She took a deep breath and closed her eyes. "Look at them, I can't sense anything from them. Fragile and weak creatures. If things like them survive, then that means that. I don't know how to explain this anymore." He chuckled and clutched his stomach in pain. "I mean that this place must be simple and without many predators. It's something about the environment. If Orochimaru's calculations were correct, then there are at least 7 years before that thing arrives in Konoha." He wasn't very sure about the numbers though. "Ah. You're right." She opened her eyes and saw the birds and critters around. He worded it very poorly, but he was right. If the creatures here are weak and fragile, then that means the ecosystem isn't as harsh and demanding, and that whatever went wrong hadn't happened yet. The harsher the environment, the stronger the creatures in it. But then again, she didn't need her Byakugan to see that the place was peaceful. The two stayed there in silence for a few minutes, enjoying the tranquility of this new world's natural surroundings, eventually falling asleep side by side. Next day, the morning after, was sort of awkward for the two. They woke up to find themselves spooning. To think that but 2 days back she was trying to drain his life force dry, while he was trying to seal her away. Truly a lot has happened in these 2 days, the two reflected, unknowingly reflecting each other's thoughts, before their hunger and thirst made them snap out of it. The first thing they did was hunt and cook the first animal that they ran across, which happened to be the world's unluckiest boar. Then they both formed water out of their own chakra to drink. To Naruto it felt sort of strange, but the energy he recovered through drinking water that he made was more than the cost of making said water. Naruto sighed. They were both in front of the campfire where they had devoured the boar. "So, now what? Where should we start?" "I am not sure. I suppose we should find civilization and learn more about this planet." Kaguya answered. The veins around her eyes bulged. The Byakugan was a special type of eye. Through it the user could see over vast distances, through objects, and even emotions and souls. Kaguya's eyes were special even among the rest. She didn't need to push them to their limit to find what she was looking for. They both had recovered a lot of their missing chakra, and her chakra robes reformed. "There is a river not far from here, to that direction." Kaguya pointed at a direction through the forest, unsure how she should name it, given that they were in a different planet. "The river goes through a city." "I was forgetting you had the Byakugan. Can you see the people of the city?" Naruto asked, staring at the direction that she pointed. Her eyebrows twitched, but she complied and focused on the people. "They look human, like the people from your world, but they do not seem to possess chakra." "So, you like this place?" Naruto asked and chuckled. He knew about her stated motives and desire to take his chakra. But for now, he was safe in the knowledge that she needed him as much as he did her. She ignored him, got up and began walking in the direction of the city. After about an hour walking together in silence, at a somewhat fast pace, they reached the river. Slightly unnerved by the long silence, and fearing that he had somehow angered her, he mustered up the courage to try and start a conversation. "I think we may stand out a lot on the city, you know, horns, pale eyes, torn clothes, whiskers. Think we should do something about it?" he asked, and she stopped walking to turn to him. She blinked. He had a point. Maybe they should do something about their appearance. Coating her hand in chakra, she prepared to cut off her horns, but Naruto grabbed her wrist and stopped her. He looked startled. "Whoa, no need to cut them off." He released her wrist. "It's possible to disguise them, and your eyes, and my whiskers, and our clothes, but our smell, we should take a bath for that." She looked at the river. Very well then. Without so much as a warning, her robes dispersed and she was left as naked as sunlight. Whoa, what are you doing?" Naruto blushed and turned away from her. "You said that we should take a bath, I agree." She tied her hair into 4 large buns. "I didn't think you cared about modesty, given our first encounter." Naruto's blush intensified and he began to fiddle with his hands. Oh, that was different. I'll just leave and come back later. That would be an unnecessary waste of time, join me. She ordered as a round depression was imprinted on the ground besides the river, which then began to fill with water. Naruto hesitated to look at her, but when he finally did, she was already inside the improvised tub and it was already filled with water. Are you waiting for an invitation? She asked and the water steamed. Oh no, right, he looked around and took off his clothes and pouch, placing them on the ground besides Kaguya and entered, trying his best to not look at her body. Calm down, she's the sage's mom, my ancestor, she made black zetsu. The water temperature continued to rise, reaching an almost uncomfortable warmth. Opening her hand, Kaguya created a blue and white stone and then dropped it on the water. She could create dimensions, bath salts and soap weren't a problem. So, let's be honest with each other, Naruto, now getting used to her, tried to continue the conversation, trying to keep his eyes on her face. How do you feel about working together? She stared at him blankly, with the usual Hyuga stoic expression. Bubbles began to appear on the water along with a nice fragrance, from the stone she dropped earlier. We may as well get this over with now. If we are to do this together, then I need to trust you and you need to trust me. No backstabbing, no deception, if we are to do this together. If we can't, we may as well part ways now. Naruto sighed, and looked into her eyes. Unlike her, he didn't have a Byakugan capable of seeing souls and emotions, he had Senjutsu, but it didn't work on her when it came to that. It was also a bit of a risk he was taking in bringing up the conversation, and Kaguya knew that. Although they were both exhausted, he didn't stand a chance at sealing her alone, much less killing her if she decided to end him then and there. I do not want to kill you. Kaguya answered simply, maintaining her stoic face. I do want the chakra inside you, but I know that I will need you as you are if we are to succeed. If you survive and we accomplish what we came here for, then I will take my chakra back. Naruto blinked a few times and grinned, at least she was being honest, or so he thought. I can work with that. Then you can count on me, believe it. His grin widened and he would have given her a thumbs up, if it weren't for the limited arm movement given the small tub they were in. How do you suggest we disguise ourselves? Kaguya tilted her head. It was really hard to judge her emotions, but he guessed that she was fine with their arrangement. I don't know, I'd need to get a closer look for me to know exactly, but for starters, let's hide these horns and eyes. He scooted next to her and placed his hand on her head. Smoke erupted around her and when it dispersed, her horns and her third eye disappeared. Her Byakugan was changed to a pair of cerulean eyes like his, but it still didn't help much to determine her emotion. What technique is this? It is similar yet different to those that you used. Kaguya saw herself through a hazy reflection on the water. It was just an image on top of her face, she could still feel her horns on her head. The new eyes were lifeless and stationary, just as much as her usual ones. Why do you have to keep reminding me of that? Naruto huffed. He used the reverse harem jutsu once on her, and she refused to let him forget about it. That is just a simple disguise. It is temporary, hopefully they have sunglasses and headbands in this world. Sunglasses? She asked, blinking a few times. It was slightly unnerving, like talking with a doll. Oh right, they are a somewhat new invention, dark-tinted glasses on metal or plastic frames that people put in front of their eyes to hide them, or to weaken sunlight. Naruto explained and she nodded, then got up. Not being prepared for her sudden movement, Naruto failed to turn away in time and ended up seeing what he had been avoiding, every single thing. Oh god no. That's Madara's body, erase, 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 Naruto chanted with his eyes closed, the mental image of Madara overriding his memory of Kaguya's body. Get ready, we need to go. Naruto heard Kaguya say and opened his eyes to see her back in her robes, skin already dry. Right, yeah. He got out of the water and looked at his old dirty clothes. Unlike Kaguya, he couldn't make chakra clothes, and putting them back on would defeat the purpose of the bath. So, after a few seconds of thinking, he made a hand sign and smoke covered him. When it dispersed, he was wearing a set of clothes. If I can use the sexy jutsu to appear naked, then the opposite can work as well. Man, it feels cold though. He bent down and picked up his pouch. There were some important things in it that he couldn't lose. To Kaguya, he was still naked, which was amusing, but she didn't show her amusement, or any emotion for that matter. They resumed their walk with no further conversation, till they spotted the city on the horizon. The city was large and the river went down through it, joining with several other streams along the way. Kaguya could see that the river flowed into the sea on the other side of the city. There were roads heading towards it, with cars and other vehicles passing by, which were completely foreign to the two. In the middle of the road there was an immobile and seemingly broken vehicle, with a bit of smoke coming from the front. Naruto and Kaguya were far from that road, but they could see it well. A man came out from the metal thing and opened a lid on the front, where the smoke seemed to be originating from. His clothes are simple, I think I can blend in with my jumpsuit, Naruto told Kaguya, taking a seat by a nearby rock. I think there is somebody inside that thing, can you see? Yes, there is a woman. Kaguya analyzed the woman and her clothing began to shift, changing into black pants similar to jeans and a tank top with a buttoned-up shirt above, the shirt and tank top being black and white, carrying her Six Paths theme and magatamas along it. Will this do? I guess you could shorten your hair a bit, make those buns smaller, but no matter what we do you'll still stand out regardless. Naruto shrugged and got up. Kaguya's hair shrunk and thinned, undoing the buns that she had, her hair falling to the middle of her back. Is this better? Yeah, sure, follow my lead, Naruto said, and the two continued to the city. 1 month later, adapting to the new world was difficult due to many factors, the main ones being that neither of them understood the native language and they had no understanding of their technology. Some of the things were familiar to Naruto, like radios, ramen and gold. It seems that even in a different dimension ramen was a real thing. Fortunately, gold was a precious metal just like in his home dimension and could be used to obtain currency, and thankfully that was something Kaguya could produce. Their combined ability and expertise of sensing and seeing emotions helped them a lot with understanding people and settling in, plus the occasional soul reading from the handful of criminals that were enticed by the idea of stealing their gold. Turns out, being a complete unknown and selling large quantities of gold makes the criminal underworld interested in you. Currently the two aliens found shelter in a small one-bedroom apartment that belonged to one of the aforementioned criminals. Naruto never found out what Kaguya did to the poor fool. He didn't quite feel that it was worth it to argue with her over the subject. The apartment's state was quite shabby when they first settled in, with grime and rubbish scattered around the place. But after a day of cleaning, a bit hard work, and Kaguya's abilities, they turned the place into something almost fitting for a goddess. Kaguya wanted to expand further to the other apartments, but that was where Naruto drew the line. They had already attracted unwanted attention with their large sale of gold. They needed to lay low for a while, especially given they knew very little of this new world, and had to consider the possibility that there were enemies around them that they couldn't beat. Speaking of enemies, they found nothing on the gigantic monster that destroyed their world, or the army of Crimson Knights that invaded. One would think that there should be some clues on them, but nothing so far. Of course, their searching methods were rather limited given their also limited understanding of the world's languages, writings and technology. The two were currently in their apartment, Kaguya sitting on their bed, a large bed with a golden frame and black and white sheets, watching novels on her third favorite modern invention, TV. Her second favorite modern invention being the chocolate milkshake and the first being carrot cakes with chocolate frosting. Meanwhile, 3 blonde clones sat on the ground, each one reading a different book. They had small notebooks by their sides and kept taking small notes every once in a while. Kaguya wore tight black pants and a white shirt that showed her midriff. Her hair was loose, reaching the middle of her back, and her horns were out since there was no need to hide herself in their home. On the bedside there was a pair of round sunglasses and a beret that she used when she went outside. The clones wore only their version of the black pants, their torso bare. This is so boring, my head hurts. One of the copies complained to another. How's Illustrated Dictionary of Mythology, another Naruto said to the first, looking at his book. Mine is Japanese for Dummies, which isn't too bad, for a textbook anyways. Well, the Herbal Alchemist's Handbook is actually pretty good. If we learn how to use Mokuton someday, then this can be useful. The third copy told the rest, showing his book. There was a pile of books besides the 3. Can you 3 be quiet? Robert and Lucy are finally going to kiss, yes. Kaguya gave a small grin as the 2 people on the screen kissed, causing the 3 Narutos to stare at her with a stoic expression. That's just not worth arguing over. There could be worse things for her to do. All 3 Narutos thought and then went back to their books. They had to pick their fights with her carefully and wisely. The program that she was watching ended with the kiss, the next program being a religious one. Good night, brothers and sisters. On tonight's The Show of Faith, we are continuing our study of Revelations, the preacher on the TV said, and the Naruto's ear perked up, while Kaguya prepared to turn it off. Wait, don't. I want to hear what he has to say. One of the Narutos told Kaguya, and she tilted her head to him. You are interested in preaching? Kaguya asked and placed the controller down. Why the sudden interest? I think there is something going on. Ever since we arrived here, I found nothing on monsters or that gigantic creature. The Naruto with the book on myths went to the bed. I've been reading about these myths and legends, but they're all about religions from long ago, and none mention the red beast. This Christianity has a widespread following nowadays, but the information I read tends to contradict itself. There seem to be several strange happenings around religious hotspots like churches, happenings that seem to be where all the contradiction centers on. I think there's something going on and maybe this could shed some light. The other clones dropped their books and focused completely on the TV. I hadn't thought about it like that. I should pay more attention. Kaguya also focused on the TV. On a previous program, the preacher had already went through the letters to the churches. And for the next 40 minutes he went through the seals and had started on the 7 spiritual figures, and John stood upon the sea and saw a beast rise out of the abyss, and it had 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns, 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. We will continue this study next Saturday. Now we'd like to give a chance to our rising singer Philip and then the tithes and offerings. One of the Narutos picked up the remote and turned off the TV. You see that? Yeah, cults take tithes and offerings in this world too, maybe. No, don't go there. We need to keep a low profile. That is our #1 rule, no attracting attention. We don't know what we are up against. Another Naruto interrupted Kaguya, making her eyebrow twitch. But more importantly, the other thing that he just said, about the beast coming from the abyss, big scary creature with 7 heads, 10 horns, and bad breath, sound familiar? Of course I noticed it, idiot. Kaguya glared slightly. I cannot forget that creature. You think that there is a relationship between this cult and the beast? Maybe. I think that it is definitely worth looking into. A clone said, and the one that had the mythology book interjected. Maybe there is something going on with all of these myths. If one is true, then what else is? Now, I'll dispel these two and we continue this talk tomorrow when I wake up, the last Naruto said, and the other two dispelled in bursts of smoke. A few seconds later, his eyes rolled to the back of his head and he fell unconscious on the bed. Kaguya stared at his unconscious body. It would be so easy for her to get rid of him now, take back her chakra. It was very tempting. She could hear the whispers in the back of her head telling her to do it. But she couldn't do it. She needed him at his best. She couldn't do it all alone, and she owed him. He has been studying till he collapsed for the last few weeks, something that she couldn't bring herself to do. His presence made her life easier, a commodity that she was growing used to. Naruto began to snore. Kaguya poked his cheek. He was completely out cold just like the other times, and he probably wouldn't wake up if the world was falling apart. Using clones to study was taking its toll on his already damaged mind. Kaguya pulled the sheets from underneath him and covered him with them, then stared at him. She must have stared at him for an entire hour, thinking, how can he sleep so relaxed? She didn't feel tired. She had recovered her chakra almost completely and she barely spent any of it throughout the day. Still, there wasn't much to do, or rather, there was plenty to do and study, but she didn't feel like doing them. So, she dispelled her clothes and crawled underneath the sheets besides him and just laid there. Next morning Naruto woke up with a searing migraine and blurry vision. He got up and found Kaguya on the dining table, drinking a chocolate milkshake. There were waffles, syrup and orange juice on the table, presumably for him. He rubbed the sleep out of his eyes and shook his head, then got up from the bed and went to the table. How long you've been waiting this time? Just came back. Kaguya said, taking sips of the milkshake. Every once in a while, she'd bring breakfast for him from a nearby coffee shop. Oh, great then. He sat on the table inside. His head was spinning and it was very hard to focus. Kaguya noticed and knew about the cause, but didn't comment on it. What time is it? 11. She stared at him with her usual stoic expression. It used to be unnerving, but by now he'd gotten used to it. Ahem. He poured the syrup on the waffles and began to eat. You look like you got something to say. Last night, you said we would continue the conversation. I have been waiting. She finished the milkshake and Naruto's eyes widened slightly. Oh, right. Give me a few minutes. He drank the orange juice and finished up eating, then closed his eyes. He stood still, then slowly inhaled and then slowly exhaled and used the calming exercise to gather his thoughts. When he opened them again, they were focused, sharp. To them, the beast in the apocalypse isn't a literal thing, Rather some kind of metaphor. Now we know the beast is real, and it exists somewhere in this world, but what else is real? If they were common knowledge then we would have found out about them already, so it is possible that these things are hidden. We need to find out how much of it is real. Naruto sighed, and rubbed his forehead. And where do you think we should start? I'm not sure where we should start. Naruto looked around, his mind starting to warm up. Kaguya stared at him blankly and after a short while he snapped his fingers. I think that if there are angels and devils among these humans, then either they are invisible or undetectable to us, in which case there's no use in searching. Or there simply isn't any in this city for us to detect at all, so we should get moving and try our luck on other cities. He stopped to think for a few moments. From now on, you should keep your Byakugan activated for as long as possible. Look for clues, abnormal energy, anything different to give us a starting point. He's becoming smarter. Is this a product of the abuse and stress of his copies? Kaguya activated her Byakugan. Is there anything else? Yay, there is, just give me a second. Naruto clutched his stomach as if in pain, took a deep breath and recomposed himself. We should use this place as base, or find another if it proves to be too distant from what's important to us. We should start moving. Also, I've been meaning to ask, can you create dimensions? I mean, did you create the ones that you used during our fight? How does that work? Do they still exist? He's in pain, a side effect of the changes to his brain. His body is suffering from the abuse his mind is going through. Kaguya walked over to the bedside and picked up her sunglasses. I did create those dimensions, but because we've traveled so far away, they are too far for me to access them. The process of creating them is difficult to explain. You can make others then? I could, but the quick method would attract attention and the slow and subtle method would take me several days of preparation. Kaguya answered as Naruto stretched himself. I wish I had asked you earlier when we arrived. I'd need you in your eyes. I could end up missing a lot, but we would need a more stable and reliable base. He closed his eyes and began weighing the options. You should stay and do what you have to do, that is more important at the moment. I'll go alone and try to figure out as much as I can. You do not want to stay and supervise? Kaguya stated, not bothering to be subtle about the subject. Supervise? Nah. Look, we went through this already. We need to trust each other, for the sake of the mission. I'll give you the space that you need and do my part. Naruto smiled with his eyes closed and then walked over to his backpack, a simple dark orange one. I trust you will put whatever personal objective aside for now and do what you have to for the mission. Of course. Kaguya's lips curled upwards, and I trust you will do so as well. I will come back in 2 weeks. He filled his backpack with books that he had yet to finish and that he should read, and left in a burst of speed. Scene skip. Beach. On the beach, Naruto stared at the ocean, deep in thought. It was night and there was nobody around. He had a rolled-up map in his right hand. According to the map, he was in Australia, and if he went north then he would end up in New Guinea and then Japan. They say that the more you love something, the farther you're willing to go for it. Sasuke loved his clan and family, Itachi loved his village and little brother, Obito loved Rin, Madara loved his little brother and his clan. They all went to extreme lengths for the things and people that they loved. Naruto loved his friends, he loved his village, he loved his people. He wanted to bring peace to his world, stop the wars, stop the suffering, but he wasn't strong enough. He couldn't save his village, he couldn't bring peace to his world, he couldn't save a single friend. Uzumaki Naruto wasn't good enough, he had to be better. Returning the map back to his backpack, he zipped it up, reached to his pouch and pulled out 2 small jars. The jars were filled with a pale green liquid and floating inside one jar was a red eye with 3 tomos on them. Obito's remaining eye, his last gift to Naruto before his death by the hands of the leader of the Crimson Army. Inside the other jar were Sasuke's, or rather Itachi's eyes, an eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, and a unique Rinnegan. He knew, deep down, that these were his best bet at success at the moment. He knew, deep down, that he couldn't expect Kaguya to do what must be done if he himself couldn't. Naruto was many things, but a hypocrite was not one of them. Yet, he also knew that having these eyes would change him. He feared what these eyes represented. Would he be lost in his own regrets and fears, like many Uchiha had in the past? Would he become a monster, an unfeeling killing machine? He shook his head. As much as he feared them, he needed the advantages they would grant him, the unrivaled powers of Sasuke's Rinnegan, the perfect recollection and attention to detail of the Mangekyo Sharingan, Kamui. Is it too late to speak to Kaguya? He mused to himself. Shaking his head, the blonde placed both jars on the rock beside him. He raised a hand to his face. Walking through the ocean wasn't fun, walking through it blindfolded didn't make it any more so. His medical knowledge wasn't close to that of Tsunade or Sakura, but when he could just touch stuff and voila, it is healed, he could go on and manage without that expertise. But that didn't make the process any less painful and fatiguing. Ripping out his eyes hurt, a lot, and attaching new eyes was just as uncomfortable. How the heck did Uchiha pluck them out as if they sunglasses? He didn't know, but he learned to respect their tolerance to the pain. He tore out both of his eyes and replaced them with Obito's right and Sasuke's left eye. They seemed to work, but keeping them up and running was an unnecessary use of his chakra when he needed them to keep him above water and running, so he didn't quite have much time to test them out. Nor did he try to either. Those type of things could be complicated, sensitive. Sure, he could heal and mend stuff, but should he push his luck? He had felt like he shouldn't, so after transplanting and replacing eyes, he blindfolded himself with a piece of cloth, entered Sage Mode and began running through the sea. Sage Mode also felt different, but that was to be expected. Different universe, different energy. Through it he sensed the fish and creatures and used them to map the surroundings and depth of the sea below, to sort of guide him. It took him a while, maybe a day or two of running, but he found land, not quite the land that he was expecting. He underestimated his own speed, and the distance between one continent to another, combined with a few wrong turns, he ended up skipping New Guinea, ending up in the Ryukyu Islands, just a bit south of the southern part of Japan, Kagoshima. Upon arriving, the first thing he did was find a place to rest and recover, to then start his search for anything abnormal. It was already hard to find something that you know what it is or what it looks like, even harder to find something that you don't know what it looks like. But thankfully he had a few factors on his side, the first factor being clones. Why do something alone when you can make clones to help you do it? The second factor, and equally important if not a little bit more than the first, is senjutsu. By connecting himself with the world's unique energy, he could get a better feel on the energy of people and surroundings. Things that he wouldn't have noticed without, and maybe that's why Kaguya couldn't see as well for whatever reasons, or if she could then she didn't say. Things like an increase in energy around churches, some people having slightly more energy than others, and then there were the oddballs. As he and his clones went through the cities, he noticed humanoid beings with different energy signature, that turned out to not be human at all. Strange little spirits lurking around, foxes in human disguise, but those weren't the oddballs yet. The oddballs were humans with different energy signatures deep inside their core. It was very hard to notice. He had to pass very near them to detect the difference in the feel of their energy. Kind of reminded him of Jinchuriki's. Which served to Kaguya's defense that maybe she wasn't used to the new energies to distinguish them enough, or that possibly the energies didn't appear for her eyes. It was hard to tell which was worse, an energy that her eyes couldn't distinguish or that she was withholding things. Right now it has been 4 days since he parted ways with Kaguya and 2 days since he arrived in Japanese territory. He'd seen what he had to see on the Ryukyu Islands and left to the north, to the main part of Japan, where he had higher chances of running into something interesting. His eyes were still blindfolded, but he knew that the name of the city is Kuo. Because literal blindfolds were attracting too much attention, he swapped them for shades and simply kept his eyes closed. He was walking around the city with his hands tucked in his pocket when he felt a new type of energy, a demonic type and holy type. The holy type was similar to what he felt around churches and temples but more concentrated. He tracked the source and came to find 2 humanoids. Now he couldn't see them to distinguish their features, but he could tell through deduction that they probably looked human. Their energies was also easier to detect, so he knew that Kaguya would undoubtedly have spotted them if she ran across them, and maybe even he would without senjutsu. Besides the 2, there were more, with dark energy as well, following them, like half a dozen of them. He followed them for a short while, noticing that they seemed to be on a date. They had lunch, went to the park, and that was where he stopped following them. It was getting late, and if he did continue to follow them, then the Dark One's friends would have spotted should he kept going. Which brings him to his current location, a cheap motel. My head hurts so much, no more senjutsu, no more clones. Naruto dropped down on the bed. Ah, who am I kidding, tomorrow there will be more again. He rolled around the bed and sat himself upwards. Those things, I'm sure that if they exist, then that dark energy source was a devil. It didn't feel human, unlike that holy energy. He sighed and took off his shades. More important than those 2, what were the hidden ones doing? They were clearly trying to conceal themselves from them. Naruto heard from besides him. His altar was back, it seemed. I don't know, I need to keep observing them. Maybe I should talk to them. We can't talk to them yet. That's too early. And are you ready to fight them and the others watching them? We probably could. But let's play this smart just in case and observe. We're only here to find clues, not dive head on. Naruto heard its footsteps around the room but couldn't feel any vibrations from the ground. Yeah, I guess you're right, or I'm right. This is confusing. Naruto chuckled a bit. He was talking to himself. He was becoming insane. There is no right or wrong between our arguments. We are a part of you. We are only helping you come to the best decisions. It said and stopped in front of Naruto. Also, we're heading to the 5th day since the transplant. You should start using them to get used with the chakra drain and effects of them. So long as you don't push too much chakra through them, then there shouldn't be any problems. Yay, but tomorrow, I need to sleep now, so stop bothering me. Naruto rolled around the bed and the presence of his other disappeared. Next day, waking up refreshed and ready for more, the first thing that Naruto did was open his eyes. At first it was weird, very weird. The world was brighter and much more focused. He glanced outside and saw a pigeon. It was slow, like watching something in slow motion. He closed his eyes and gathered his concentration. When he opened them again, everything wasn't back to normal, but it was close enough. Thankfully, neither of the eyes were taking much of his chakra. It was neglectful on the short term at least. He also should consider himself lucky for both eyes staying in their normal 3 Tomos stage, and not in their Rinnegan and Mangekyu form. Which was fine, he could figure out how to use their evolution later. A surprise came when he entered Sage mode and saw himself in the mirror. He didn't have the usual frog colors, he didn't gain any features. But the world became even clearer, especially now that he was using his eyes as well. Tracking down the source of the dark energy once more, he found out that it was female, and that he was right that they looked humanoid. She was a rather beautiful and well-endowed silver-haired woman. He could tell that she was hiding something on her back, most probably wings of some sort. Jackpot, she must be a devil in human disguise, but, Naruto thought as he saw her from afar, then looked around for the ones following her. Huh, only one following, where are the rest? I should make a clone to look for the one with holy energy. When there was nobody looking, he discreetly made a clone which body flickered away immediately. Now, I observe, Naruto followed and watched the lady from afar. After a while she met up with 2 more of her kind, and judging by their body posture around her, they were servants of sorts. They also weren't the ones that had been following her, so it made him wonder if the ones following her were even friendlies at all. Look, I know what you're thinking, you want to get information personally, I get it, I'm you, but are you sure? Other Naruto said, appearing besides the real him. Yeah, I'm sure. I can learn much more by getting close, plus she seems friendly. Naruto prepared to walk over to the supposed devil's location, but was stopped by his other. Okay then, but if we're doing this the right way. Other Naruto pointed to the one stalking the woman and her friends and subordinates. That thing over there, the one observing them. We can probably sneak up on it and get the drop on him. Before we talk to her, we should at least take him down and interrogate it, or even use that technique you thought of a few days back. I'll question him, but I can't use that technique, it goes against everything I believe in. Naruto took a deep breath and shook his head, then vanished in a burst of speed. The poor devil hardly saw what happened. One moment he was looking ahead, the next, nothing, he blacked out. Naruto appeared behind him and chopped him on the back of the neck with a chakra-powered chop, instantly knocking him unconscious. Hey, it does work on them. Naruto chuckled to himself and then picked up the devil and vanished with him to an empty, ruined building. I'm glad that they fall down like normal people. Would be in trouble if they didn't. I should name that attack. Yay. I'm calling it the Uzumaki chop. The devil was completely out cold, so he couldn't respond, and his other wasn't around either, so he was met with silence. And now what? He nudged the knocked out devil with his shoe. Should probably wake him up, but before that. A clone of him appeared besides him and left to go watch the woman that he was observing before, best to not let her unchecked. And with that taken care of, he lifted the devil and leaned his back against the wall. Smack. Naruto smacked the devil across the face in an effort to wake him up, but nothing. The guy was completely out cold. Speaking of cold, Naruto gained an idea. I know what will do the trick. He left for a few seconds and came back with a bucket filled with ice and water. Placed the bucket besides the devil, grabbed his head and shoved his head inside the bucket. At first his body was limp, but after a few moments, he began to struggle to get his head off the bucket and accumulate energy. Having anticipated it, Naruto pulled him out of the bucket and employed a technique that he had learned from the toads of Mount Myoboku.
Smack. Naruto smacked the devil on the face, breaking his concentration and stopping the buildup of energy.
Hey, moron, keep trying and I smack you dead. Naruto tried to speak in the language that he learned in Australia, still getting the hang of the dialect. Although what he said probably wasn't what he intended to say. Nevertheless, it worked and he stopped trying to build up magic. What are you? Naruto pointed at the man and then crossed his arms. The man looked to be in his mid-30s, wearing a trench coat, black hair and brown eyes, not much out the ordinary. What are you talking about? I'm just a normal guy, I work in a bank, I have kids. Please don't kill me. The man begged and Naruto grabbed him by the neck, lifted him up and slammed him against the wall. He may have been of a different species, but Naruto could still feel the lies from him. You know what you have to do, it is time to use that. Naruto heard in the depths of his mind, and the man began to struggle to get out of his grip. I don't want to, it is heresy, the sage would be so ashamed, Naruto said out loud, actually sounding sad about doing whatever it is, confusing the devil and scaring him. Upon releasing the devil, it gasped for breath, please man, I don't know what you're talking about, just let me go. It's going to stick to this story, let's just get it over with. Naruto grabbed him by the throat again, last chance. The devil smirked. Do it. The hand holding the devil's neck glowed golden and behind his shades his eyes swirled. The man went stiff and his body became pale right after. Naruto pulled his hand back and along with it a dark substance. He was dead. Naruto's body trembled and his eyes opened and closed rapidly as millions of images flew through his mind in a second. The dark substance slipped through his hand as he lost his grip and faded away. Ploft. Naruto fell on his back, his mouth opening and closing. There were so many memories, so many images. The technique was a perversion of Ninshu and his own ability to connect with people. He connected with his target and ripped out their essence, a crude version of the human path from Nagato. Connect and pull, he was great when it came to tugs of war. The problem was that it was untested. He knew about how it worked, he fiddled with the theory, but practice was a whole different story. By grabbing their essence and by connecting with them he went through their entire life, no filters. In this case, that was a lot of stuff, the devil was at least 2 centuries old. His head was throbbing, it took all of his willpower to not faint on the spot, it was as if he left 200 clones studying for an entire year and they suddenly popped. He endured it for 30 seconds, and fainted. Unspecified amount of time later when Naruto woke up, his head was spinning, and he was starving but he was relatively fine. He certainly was better than the dead devil near him, whose half of his body had turned into dust. That didn't work out well. Naruto heard as he regained his vision. The knockback was such that even the eyes deactivated. That was on you, never listening to you again. Naruto got up and looked around. The devil was still dead and from the lighting on the room, or lack of it, it was now night. But I'm you, so you realize the problem with that. Other wrapped his arm around Naruto's shoulder, and the strange thing was that he felt him. Sorry, but it was necessary, needed to reboot you and gain information in the process. I ejected the useless information we got from him and kept some snippets that could be useful. Close your eyes and focus, you can go through them too. This is just great, if kaguya and secret cults weren't bad enough, now I got to worry about my own consciousness. A heads up would have been real nice. Naruto rubbed his forehead and closed his eyes. Hey, if it is of any consolation, between you and these things, I'm a fan of you. You gotta take it easy from now on. Outer warned him and disappeared. Flashes and words flew through Naruto's mind. Hell, a passage, civil war, 4 Satans, pillars, lots of important stuff, on another time. Right now there was something else really important going on, revolving around King Peace and the devil that he was observing. The guy was a grunt, lots of information, some useless, others invaluable for a newcomer like him, but still he was just a grunt. I wonder if Kaguya is having as hard of a time as I am. Naruto sighed and opened his eyes. Probably not, there is no helping it, I have to talk with her. Whatever it was that he and his friends are going to do, I might have sped things up. He felt like activating the eyes, but now that Outer was away, he had access to some of the stuff of the things that it knew, or he knew, and through it he knew that if he activated the Sharingans again, then he wouldn't be able to deactivate them. It was confusing to Naruto. His mind was gaining a mind of its own, and it seemed to be getting more active as time passed. Staring at his hand, he opened and closed it, and a large spider crawled out from the back of it to his palm and then jumped down. He blinked and it disappeared from the floor. What the fuck is going on with me? I probably shouldn't activate the Sharingan now. Whatever, I can figure this out later. Naruto shook his head and left to find the devil from before. The clones that he had made earlier had dispersed when he fainted. As he left, he felt that there were several bursts of holy and demonic energy coming from different parts of the city. He created a shadow clone and had it go to where he felt the holy energy surge. The original went to demonic surge, which was the farthest among the two. Rooftop hopping in this modern world was tricky. Unlike in Konoha, there could be large differences in size from one place to the next, skyscrapers and phone cord, minor annoyances. Halfway to his objective, the clone that he had sent dispersed and he stopped. Clone memory. The clone had arrived on a park with one large barrier of holy energy. Inside that barrier he found that man that he had observed in a date with the devil. He was in the middle of a fight with a group of people that also had holy energy. Among them the leader seemed to be a middle-aged man with light brown hair, who wielded a large white sword with golden lines running along the blade, and a golden hilt. They are from the same group. Why are they fighting? Naruto squinted his eyes and cautiously approached. From their body language it seemed that they knew each other, and through senjutsu he could feel that they were all under turmoil. That hardly seems like a fair fight, time to make it even. He gathered chakra in his hand to make a Rasengan, but as he did the fight reached its apex. They had the man cornered and overwhelmed with their quick and consecutive attacks. He was fast and skilled but was outnumbered, and on the slip of his guard, the leader went through and swiped. He dropped his sword, his body fell limp and his head slid off his shoulders. Naruto's eyes widened and the Rasengan dispersed as the man's body and head fell to the ground. They didn't seem to notice him outside the barrier. They prayed and lit his body on fire with some type of oil. Memory, and they had the same type of energy and yet they killed him. I couldn't help him. Naruto frowned and then shook his head. Maybe it isn't late to get to the others. He pushed chakra through Obito's eye and the Sharingan appeared, morphing directly into the Mangekyo. Consequences be damned. He didn't make it that far by being overcautious. If the Uchiha Sharingan was as powerful as they claimed it to be, then it shouldn't break. There will be consequences for our meddling, but we can think about that later. I'll help you with that eye. The energy burst led him to an abandoned factory with a barrier around it. This time the barrier was made of demonic energy. He went to touch the barrier, and his hand phased through it, feeling a tug in his eye. His inner self, for as much of a pain in the head that he was helping by working around Obito's Sharingan. Phasing through the barrier, he entered and found the silver-haired devil, along with her other two friends that he had seen her with before, surrounded by around 20 devils. Her two friends was a woman with dark skin, in what seemed to be an outfit of the human military. She carried a rifle and had a pair of daggers on her back, while the other was a young bald man, very tough looking. 1. It all happened very fast. Their enemies prepared magical circles and the bald man got in front of the other two protectively, while the woman with the rifle gathered magic through her weapon. On the split second of when the surrounding enemy devils fired and the riflewoman prepared to squeeze the trigger, a smoke bomb erupted and clouded the warehouse. A huge explosion occurred from the launched attacks, and when it faded away they three were gone. Scene break. The three devils coughed and wheezed on the ground. Phew, that was a close one, hardly made it in time, Naruto said, patting away the dust from his clothes and bringing their attention to him. It was only after he said it out loud that he noticed that he had a much better handling of their language. What happened? Who are you? The silver-haired devil asked, getting up, the rest getting into a combat stance. Calm down, contain yourselves, don't need to thank me all at once. Naruto hopped to a cube a bit elevated from the one where they stood and sat on the edge. Beneath his sunglasses his right eye receded to the three tomos stage. Now if you mean what happened as in how you got into that mess, then that's what I'm trying to figure out. If you're asking about what happened in the fight, then I dragged you all here. Masaomi, I need to go help him, take me back. She glared at Naruto and he frowned. Masaomi is a guy with long black hair and holy energy, right? Naruto asked her and a feeling of foreboding came up. He really didn't want to be the one to give her the news. I'm sorry. No, he can't. How? Her energy flared and Naruto's frown deepened. Tears. I can bring him back. If I use my evil pieces on him, then I can reincarnate him. Take me to his body. Reincarnate him? Naruto became weary of them. I'm sorry for your loss. I can take you back to him, but it won't be pretty. They were burning his corpse. I got no business in here, so I won't be sticking around. He needed her for information, and he was willing to help, but he couldn't show too much interest. All he had to do was wait. Please take me back to him. Tears fell from her face, and her two friends came to her support. But mistress, are you sure? We are dead if we go back now. The woman with the weapon said. Naruto noticed that she and the bald man had some type of bond with the other woman, besides an emotional one, a magical bond. So what, you just want me to leave him? I can bring him back, I have to. Not if it means you die in the process, and if they really burned his body then there isn't anything we can do, I'm sorry Klee. The woman hugged Klee, and she cried into her chest. Naruto stayed and watched as they had their moment. He took comfort in the fact that he had shades, they were good for masking emotions and eyes, which in his case were both equally important. After a while, Klee stopped crying, for the most part, recomposed herself and went to Naruto. I'm sorry for the inconvenience, mister. Could you take us to the underworld, to my cousin's compound, he can help us. The underworld is currently out of my reach, I can drop you guys elsewhere on a different city, then I'm gone. Naruto hopped down the cube to the one where they stood on. It was strange how lying was becoming easier. The information that he got from the devil earlier wasn't helping him much now. Wait. You said you won't be around because you don't have business here. Who are you? Are you some type of mercenary? I can pay. I have money. You just need to help us get to my cousin, Dehauser. Klee pleaded, and Naruto stopped in front of her. Maybe he could gain something from this. You can call me Naruto. I'm on a tight schedule, but we can come to an agreement, but first let's go somewhere more comfortable. Naruto closed his eyes and turned away from her. This city is compromised, I could take them to base, but I don't know how they would react to Kaguya. Isn't Kaguya going to come looking for us when she's done? That could be any moment now, chances are high of them meeting her anyway. Outer Naruto appeared on top of the cube where Naruto previously stood. Naruto was about to answer him out loud, before remembering that they would think he is crazy. Where do I take them then? We could take them to that cafe in Australia, where Kaguya likes to eat. If she senses up, at least she will show up in her human disguise. Outer Naruto winked and disappeared. I think I know a nice place, prepare yourselves. Obito's eye advanced to its Mangekyu stage and began swirling, and as his eye swirled, he swirled out of existence. Gotta admit, that's a pretty cool technique. The bald man said, right before being pulled into a vortex and spat on the floor of dark alley. The second trip was worse than the first. Turned out that being ejected from the Kamui dimension was more gut-wrenching than being dragged to it. It took them a few seconds to recover, but when they did, they saw Naruto on the street outside the alley. The alley was connected to a 24H coffee shop, Kaguya's favorite place on the world, and a pawn shop. Welcome to Australia. Naruto said and walked inside the coffee shop. The three hid whatever weapons they had in pocket dimensions, followed him inside, and joined him on a table on the far corner. I can't eat, Klee said, and the rest agreed with her. I'm Claria Belial, this is my Queen Mana and my Rookjan. Wish I had met you folks on a better occasion. We'll have the usual times too, dear. Oh, and a chocolate milkshake. Naruto told a waitress that approached the table. How did you guys get into this mess? Well, we were dating, me and Masaomi. She held back the tears. They must have found out, it is forbidden, he's an exorcist, I'm a devil, I was so foolish, it was all my fault. It wasn't your fault, Klee. It was their fault, they killed him. Mana tried to comfort Claria, who was attracting attention of the people around. We were lucky that you were around, Mr. Naruto. But not to be rude, what were you doing in Kuo? John asked and Naruto raised an eyebrow. To tell the truth, or not tell the truth, that is the question. Do you want me to be honest? Naruto asked and Claria recomposed herself to nod, the three paying extra attention. Truth is that I was in Kuo by coincidence, was just traveling. I stayed in Kuo because I thought something was wrong when I noticed you devils being followed. I had no clue on what was going on or if I should intervene, so I followed the guys that were following you, and observed. I was busy when they made their move, and when I came to help your boyfriend, it was already too late, sorry. He seemed to genuinely be sad about not being able to help. You weren't too late to help us. Yeah, anyways, let's focus here. Naruto took a deep breath. Kuo is most definitely a no-go. They probably have the city on lockdown. The major passages to hell are going to be monitored, any ideas? We could disguise ourselves, pull out a distraction and slip by them. Mana suggested and Naruto glanced at John and Claria. Any other ideas? They both shook their heads and Naruto frowned and closed his eyes to think. Naruto's imagination. Naruto and outer Naruto stood in their old classroom in Konoha. On the chalkboard it was written, ideas, and in front of it was a giant flip-flop notepad. Alright then, so we have to get them to the underworld. Let's see our options. Outer flipped a page on the giant notepad and it appeared, teleport them there. We already know we can't do that. I'd need to know exactly where it stands in time-space to do that. Naruto dismissed and flipped the notepad to the next page, smuggle them with a distraction. That's what they suggested. We can do that, but there is a lot of room for mistakes, and we'd be putting our face all over. We can use a mask to hide our face. Yay, but would it matter? Our face doesn't mean anything to anybody in general. The problem is that if we do show our faces, mask or no mask, then the higher-ups will start thinking about the newcomers meddling with their business. Right, maybe we are looking at it the wrong way. How about instead of taking them to hell, we bring hell to them, or more importantly her cousin Dihauser. Naruto rubbed his chin and the word, Dihauser, appeared on the chalkboard. Yay, I like where this is heading. What do we know about the guy? Not much, but she feels like she'll be safe once she reaches him, so he must be strong or influential, or both. Right, yay. How should we get his attention then? We send a letter, mail, internet. I mean, I don't know the guy, and if I don't know him, then you don't know him, so how we find out what he is into? We could just ask Claria, no need to make things complicated. Naruto winked and left his imaginary world. Real world. When Naruto opened his eyes, there were 2 plates in front of him, with hamburgers, 2 portions of fries, 2 cups of orange juice and a milkshake. The table's surface shifted as if there were things crawling underneath it. Claria and the others didn't seem to mind, or notice. Naruto reached to touch one of the supposed creatures, but the movement stopped and the table returned to normal. He couldn't detect any energy on the table or any trace of anything. Whatever was going on, the problem was him. Are you okay? Claria asked him, and he nodded slowly and picked up the hamburger. Are you paying attention? Yay. Now while we could probably do that, how about instead of sneaking you guys in, we find a way to get in contact with your cousin and have him come to us? Naruto asked and stared at the hamburger, a cockroach crawling out of it to his hand. He didn't feel a thing and in the blink of an eye it was gone. What the hell is going on with me? I don't know. Whatever it is painful in here too. I think that you got some type of brain damage. Your brain can only take so much, implanted super eyes, clones, memories of devils. We should find a specialist, it's getting worse. The sandwich is fine by the way, it is all in our head. You don't look well. John asked and Naruto smiled. Yay, don't worry about me, go on, let's debate this subject. Okay then. John took one of Naruto's fries. Wouldn't they cut out all communications leading to him? Would they really? If they intercept and block too many things then he would surely suspect, and would investigate, could use that to our advantage. Mana clicked her tongue and Naruto took a sip of his juice. Does your cousin have people monitoring the internet, or is it possible to send letters and mail to the underworld? Naruto asked and then shook his head. We could use that as a distraction or a way to get you in. This would be much easier if my partner was here. My cousin has a lot of people working under him, might have some on the internet, but not many. There are ways of getting mail to the underworld, we mostly use our familiars for that. They have special, very risky, they must be monitoring, but I think I remember hearing about certain agencies and groups that do that type of stuff. Claria shook her head. Where is your partner? We could use that. My partner is currently busy somewhere else. If she were here then this would be a totally different ball game. Naruto stopped to think about it and glanced around. Now that he knew what he was looking for, he saw more details, dates, times, events. Beneath his sunglasses his eyes widened in realization, he was out cold for 2 entire days. Actually, chances are that she is finishing up with her task now, she can come back at any moment now. What does she do? Claria asked and Naruto finished eating. She does a lot of stuff, will help us out. Naruto sighed and wiped his mouth with a napkin. It's been a long day. You guys should find yourselves a hotel or some other place to spend the night, grieve. Yay, I guess. Claria sighed and got up, followed by her Mana and John. How are we supposed to find you again? Come here, this is my spot. Naruto smiled and got up, taking the milkshake with him. Before we part ways, you guys have any idea on where you're staying for the night? Claria glanced at the others. I hadn't thought about that yet. Yay, I thought so. You guys probably don't have money that'd work here in Australia either. Naruto took out a stack of bills from his pocket. Take this, find yourselves a hotel for the night. Technically you're supposed to be paying me, we get even later, Now you guys take care of yourselves. Oh, wow, yeah we will. Claria took the money and Naruto patted her on the shoulders and left. Thanks a lot for the help. This means a lot to me. Naruto house. After arriving at home, Naruto left Kaguya's milkshake on the table, took a shower and crawled underneath the bed's blankets. He hardly got to close his eyes before an all too familiar chakra signature arrived in the living room. It was Kaguya. She must have been very busy during the week. Her chakra signature was very low, for her, still larger than his own at his peak. She stayed for a few seconds on the living room and waltzed into the bedroom holding the milkshake that he left on the table. She was covered in dirt and seemed very tired. Drank the entire milkshake in but a few seconds and dropped down on the bed on left side of the bed, right besides Naruto, her robes dispersing as she fell. Busy week? Naruto tilted his head in her direction. Yes, the dimension is done. She tilted her in his direction. I see you also have had a busy week. You've implanted an eye from Indra and that other man, Obito. Yeah, my week was crazy. I think I found us a way to get into the occult world. Oh? I ran into a group of devils being targeted by a larger group of devils, got some information off of one of the guys from the larger group and am helping the smaller group. He nodded to himself and chuckled. Turns out that there is more to this world than what meets the eye. Kaguya half got up, using her left arm to steady herself and got underneath the blanket. Busy week indeed. Where are these devils? They're here on this city. I'm supposed to meet them tomorrow. Naruto also made himself semi-upright and stared back at Kaguya, Obito's eye closed. Simple job, they're hiring me to help them get to the cousin of the group's leader where they'll be safe. You've got all of this in the week that I was out? Kaguya slowly got closer to Naruto. Yay, real crazy week. He rubbed the back of his head and smiled sheepishly, uncomfortable with her proximity and nakedness. Maybe there is some credit in this partnership after all. Kaguya said to herself and then kissed Naruto on the cheek. Good job, tell me more about it tomorrow. I want to meet these devils, good night. She then laid down once more and turned around, leaving a confused Naruto seated on the bed. Rule number 3. The best information is hard to obtain, go the extra mile. So many people just for little ol' me, I'm flattered. Naruto raised his hands and grinned beneath his orange spiral mask. He was surrounded by at least 20 devils of varying auras. He stood in front of a dented and ruined armored van. On the driver's seat there was a dead devil bleeding out to the floor. Inside the van there were 3 large crates. On one side there was a blond man seemingly in his 30s, wearing a very distinctive gold-trimmed red noble clothes, with 15 more devils behind him. On the other side there was a beautiful young woman with long, curly cherry blossom-colored hair, seemingly in her 20s, wearing a seductive dress with high slits. She had around 10 devils behind her. Their auras were the largest, and from their positions, they were probably the leaders. Step away from the van and I'll grant you a quick and painless death, the blond man said, and Naruto lowered his arms, an action which made them all tense. So jumpy. Naruto glanced around. What happens if I say, no? Well, then it will be a real pity. I'm sure there's a handsome young man hiding beneath that mask. I can feel your vitality, it's exotic. The seductive woman gave a smile, not unlike Sai's usual fake ones. We just want the crates. There is some space in my peerage for another pet, if you be a good boy. Sorry lady, I don't think I'm fit to being anybody's pet. I'll take these crates to Dehauser territory and there is nothing you can do to stop me. Naruto smiled beneath the mask and the devils charged their magical attacks, lifted their swords and prepared themselves. The blond man in specific seemed especially furious. This ends now. The previous day Naruto slept confused and woke up confused. He hardly ever understood his partner's reasoning and way of thought. He knew that she sometimes joined him in bed naked when he fell unconscious from studying with clones. He'd woken up a few times to her staring at him. It creeped him out on the start, but he'd come to accept that she would do strange things every once in a while. He hadn't the slightest clue from where the kiss came from. Sometimes he wondered if he was becoming as crazy as her. When he woke up, she was still asleep. She must have worked hard. She rarely slept, maybe once in 2 weeks, and for just a few hours. The only time he could remember of her sleeping as much was when they both arrived. He had to admit that she was beautiful. Her silky white hair, eyes and her horns were a part of her charm. But she was his ancestor, the grandmother of his reincarnation, not to mention she was still in Madara's body. From personal and past experiences he knew that she would most likely wake up hungry. It was still early in the morning and there was some time till the meeting with Claria, so he went off to the coffee shop. He ate breakfast there and bought a milkshake and carrot cake for Kaguya. It was her favorite. He was in a good patch, no hallucinations, no pain, it was a beautiful day, and through experience he knew that it would be a long day. Arriving at his apartment, he placed the stuff on the table and sat on the sofa. He heard a shifting coming from the bedroom. Kaguya had woken up, probably from the smell of the cake. Moments later she walked into the living room, dressed, and went straight to the table. "Good morning to you too," Naruto said as she sat and prepared to eat. "Ah, good morning." She looked at him and then at the table. "Thank you. It isn't like you don't get food for me too." He got up and joined her at the table. "Today is going to be a long day, so let's enjoy the moment." Kaguya raised her eyebrows slightly. He seemed unusually cheerful. "Right, we are helping some devils get back to the underworld." "Yay, but we got a few hours till then. Want to talk about anything?" He leaned on the table. "Are you sure we can trust these devils?" She began eating the cake. Even while starving, her table manners were impeccable. Naruto thought for a few seconds and shrugged. "I don't trust them, but at least it is something." Claria seemed to be nice, but still, she was a devil and he couldn't trust her completely. It was a risk that they'll have to take. "Is there anything that I should know about them?" Kaguya asked and wiped the corner of her mouth with a napkin. "Well, they are three. There is Brian, he doesn't seem very tough. There's Mana, she uses weapons similar to of this world human military, and their leader is Claria. Her boyfriend died yesterday, so be kind to her." When Naruto said the last part, Kaguya stopped eating. Her history with boyfriends and such was bad. She had one during her life and she ended up killing him. Nevertheless, she understood that the devil might be fragile about it and nodded slowly. "I will keep that in mind." Naruto stayed silent for a few seconds, glanced around the room, then back at Kaguya. "What about the dimensions, how did it go?" "I made two. The first was the most difficult due to being discreet. The most difficult thing was finding a place to start it. Afterwards it was a matter of shaping it and using it as a gateway to another dimension." She sighed and frowned. "That eye connects with a dimension. It would have saved me time and effort if you had implanted them earlier." "Yay. I was worried about the effects though. Since this is Obito's eye and we traveled in time, I was worried that it would connect to his Kamui dimension and risk bumping into him." Naruto rubbed the back of his head. "It should have. It is possible that due to being in a different reality, the eye is accessing a different dimension than that of the original." Kaguya resumed eating. Serious problems could have happened if his eye was connected to that of past Obito's past eye. He could end up messing the entire timeline and maybe even erasing himself, and Kaguya. "Right, can you take me to them, or tell me about them?" Naruto asked, and she continued to eat and drink until she had finished. "These dimensions are close, closer than the other ones comparatively, but it would be an unnecessary use of chakra if I am to save for later." She stared at him blankly with a stoic expression, then tilted her head slightly downwards at the remains of the cake that he brought. "The first one is unfinished. I wanted your opinion. It is to be our base, so I thought you would like to help. The second is plain, heavy, like one of my previous dimensions, for emergencies." It was rather thoughtful and nice of her to want his help on shaping a dimension, too nice, almost suspicious. From what little she explained of the second one, Naruto understood it as a simpler version of her gravity dimension, which could be very useful. "You still hungry? We got plenty of time to go back and get some more, or watch TV." He looked around and chuckled. It was rare for them to have free time, rare as in never. "You are strange today," Kaguya stated in a monotone voice, staring back at Naruto blankly. He rubbed the back of his head awkwardly. "Things are strange. Felt like was yesterday that we arrived, clueless on this world's language, and with no clue on where to start." Kaguya knew that he wasn't telling all the truth, that it wasn't the reason for his strange behavior. She got up from the table, and went towards the couch. "I could watch TV." Before joining her on the couch, he went to the wardrobe and from one of the inner drawers pulled out a plain black high-collared robe along with an orange spiral mask. A mask made in the image of a previous one, once used by a man that was willing to do whatever it took, even if he was on the wrong side of it all, a man whose eye he now possesses. That mask, it is shaped after the mutated Zetsu. Kaguya noticed him pick up the mask as she was about to turn the TV on. He stared at it through Sasuke's deactivated eye, a replica of the mask that he hated for so long. "Yeah. I had it made shortly after we arrived in this city, after we began to grasp the language of this land. Obito used to use one just like this, he probably made it after the Zetsu," Naruto said and sat beside her on the couch. I know when you had it made. I didn't know that he used it as a mask before. What intrigues me is why you kept such an object and why you are contemplating the option of using it. Naruto's sole-open eye widened in surprise. Do not be surprised. Even with my Byakugan deactivated, you are still simple to read. Huh. Okay then. Naruto placed the mask on her lap. Black Zetsu manipulated Indra, Madara, and Obito. For you he created wars, massacred entire bloodlines. Kaguya opened her mouth and Naruto raised his finger to her lips and shushed her. I'm not finished. Do not interrupt me. I'm just stating facts. I've came to terms and I'm moving past what has happened and my feelings to the destruction and hate that Black Zetsu did to my world so that we can save it together. He placed his hand on the mask and ran his fingers on the lines and curves running along it. Obito was a good man. He dreamed of becoming a leader and in the end he did what was right, gave his life for us to get this far. This mask reminds me of him, and despite everything, his memory isn't a bad one. I did not mean to offend. She returned the mask to him. I cannot see the sentimental value of this mask, but if you wish to use it, then go ahead. It's not only the sentimental value, I was actually thinking on whether or not we should allow the supernatural world to know of our faces, if maybe we should be anonymous, faceless. Our faces do not mean anything to these people, but there is merit in hiding our identities. Kaguya began to focus on the TV. It was showing a soap opera of doctors that Naruto never bothered to learn anything about. Claria and the others know my face, but I guess I'll be using the mask for this mission. What happened to that mask I got for you too? I couldn't find it. I threw it away. Kaguya answered simply in a heartbeat. I refuse to wear such a ridiculous mask. Ah, but it was so cute. Naruto frowned and Kaguya's left eyebrow raised slightly. We should find you one before the mission then. I already found one. She opened her left hand and a ceramic, Japanese Oni mask appeared on top of it. It bore a striking resemblance to the Shinigami of his world, minus the horns. Kaguya's natural horns made up for the lack of them on the mask. Oh, okay. Naruto looked away from the mask. It freaked him out. You know what, it is probably for the best that you don't use any masks at all. Leave that to me. With nothing else to talk about, they watched TV together in silence. It felt strange talking and being near her after the kiss, even if it was just on the cheek. While she watched TV, he went through some of the memories and information that he kept from the devil. There were a lot of useful stuff, few information on the underworld in the Mao, a vague understanding on their powers, on the magic and energy that devils use, evil pieces, rating games, passages to the underworld. His inner self had ejected anything personal about the devil's life and kept only the useful historic information. After they were done and the time for the meeting had come, they wore their human disguise and went to the cafe and found Claria along with her peerage waiting for them. They were all stressed. From first observation it seemed that they had no sleep. They were jumpy and alerted. The two took a seat on the table opposite to the devils and Naruto gave a friendly smile. Guys, this is my partner that I told you about, Kaguya. Kaguya. These are the devils, Claria, Mana and Brian. They were quite the odd pair, even with their disguises, Naruto with his messy golden hair and Kaguya with her silky white. Kaguya's disguise for the day included a white long-sleeved shirt with 9 black tomos on 3 rows and the Rinne Sharingan on top and thigh shorts. We are ready, Claria said, going straight to the point. Very well then, I thought of a simple enough plan for us. Well, simple for you guys. My end is going to be a bit complicated. Naruto smiled, his soul active Sharingan glowing slightly beneath his shades. And what will that be? Mana asked and he leaned forward. Okay, but before we get started, can you tell me more about the shipping companies? Later there were several special shipping companies that took stuff to the underworld. When somebody had certain objects that they needed delivered fast and safely, they hired one of these companies. Most of the major companies had human bases and functioned as the usual human postal delivery system as a cover. Now that they knew what they were looking for, Naruto and Kaguya were on an empty apartment on a building a mile or so away from a large shipping company called DevX. Kaguya was observing them with her Byakugan while simultaneously writing down what she saw on a notebook for Naruto to read. She'd drawn 3-dimensional sketches of the rooms and was now transcribing their work pattern and behavior. Her artistic abilities surprised him. He didn't expect her to be one for that. Actually, he didn't really think of her with any hobbies. The image that came to his mind of her gardening wasn't a very pleasant image, involving a gigantic tree. Some problems could be solved by going head-on and turning said problem into a smoking crater on the ground. This one wasn't the case. It required a certain fitness, patience and tactical planning. They had to be very thorough, they needed patterns, schedule, they needed to know who would be going to hell for deliveries, their response time, how they got there, everything. They watched and observed for hours, Kaguya writing down every detail, from every creature in the facility. Naruto now wore a black cloak above his usual clothes and held the orange spiral mask loosely on his left hand with the tip of his fingers. Behind them both were three somewhat large boxes wrapped up with several, fragile, tapes and with devil magics protecting it. This should be enough, I'll have to get a closer look for more details. You got any questions on the plan? Naruto asked and Kaguya deactivated her Byakugan. I am ready. She placed down the notebook and turned towards him. Okay then, I'll sneak in, do some research to initiate the plan. He went to pat one of the crates, but stopped midway upon feeling the itch on his arm return. On the surface of his handworms crawled and dug through his skin. They aren't real, I must resist. He placed on the mask and activated Obito's Mangekyu, then erupted in smoke. When the smoke died down, he was the same as without mask, cloak, whiskers, and black hair. His eyes were as blue and bright as when he first arrived. Sometimes the best disguises were the most obvious ones, even if it meant as disguising himself, with himself. He hoped that when and if he dispelled it, or if he was found out, then they'd think he isn't like the illusion and that the person of the illusion is a completely different person. Plus the situation demanded that he was in disguise at the same time that he wasn't. Well, you be ready. He sent the crates to the Kamui dimension and left to the company. He walked in through the front door and glanced around. There were a lot of devils and supernatural creatures, working in disguise of a legit human company. The place was filled with human customers, but the grand majority of the workers were devils. He had to be cautious. Alright, a work schedule would be great, but they must be on the computers. Naruto glanced at the people working behind computers. Not necessarily. From what we know of devils is that they like to stick to the old ways. Even if they are getting modern now, it doesn't mean all of them are. The heavy lifting and actual work is all going on in the back. Maybe we can find something useful there. Outer, Naruto appeared besides the original, pointing to a passage to the back. His hand was burned and Naruto caught up on it, wondering if it had something to do with his most recent itches and visions. What, you thought you're that one having a hard time? It rolled its eyes and disappeared. Regardless of what it said, Naruto was already going to have to check the back, but there was still things for him to see before he moved on. There were a lot of people waiting, seated for their ticket to be called, so he got a ticket and sat down to observe. The main objects of his attention were devils, which could be sending things to the underworld because he needed to know their response time and protocols. Most importantly, he needed to find out the time it took for them to deliver things of varying urgency. There were two devils and another creature that went and had their objects mailed. He observed their forms of payment, and noted that it varied between jewels, gold and silver coins and memorized each of the packages that they wanted to deliver. When the last one was taken to the back, he used the Kamui to sneak his way there as well. Obito's eye was perfect for this type of assignment. It should have been getting easier to use, but the more he used the eye, the more painful it got. He tried healing it, but while it repaired the damage on the eye, his head continued to pound. It could be that he should have implanted both eyes, and that was the issue, but it seemed unlikely, and the long-range Kamui wouldn't be as helpful as Sasuke's Rinnegan could be. On maybe another occasion he could replace either of the eyes for their counterpart, but right now he had exactly what he needed. Unlike in the front, the creatures in the back walked freely. There were familiars and creatures of all sorts and shape sizes, all wearing the company's uniform in some way. The place was huge, as he expected and saw before, much larger than the actual structure. It was there that all the magic happened, where they loaded the trucks and prepared them to wherever it is that they must go. That being either outside or through a portal. He quickly scanned the area and found the 3 packages among others, one of them being loaded into a truck while the others were placed along with other things. Naruto took his time to look around and observe the workers from the shadows, watch how they know what and where they were needed. He studied their routine. The package that was separated from the rest was dispatched through the portal within the hour along with 3 creatures. Naruto noted that the different shipments had different care. Some had only one person handled dozens of packages, while in that case it was 3 for a single object. Different prices for different services and priorities. With that in mind, he made sure to identify those in charge of deliveries. There were some workers on standby doing nothing in particular, and a select few that helped their peers with their jobs like packing and sorting, but didn't seem to work on the function. which meant that they were either bored and trying to score points on their free time, or really lousy with their jobs. Either way, Naruto memorized all of them and waited for other shipments to know more. He confirmed his theory when a few of the workers that were helping others along with some on standby went and took vans outside or through the portal. He also noted that only the ones that were helping the others went to the underworld. Alright, now I just need to find a way to turn the odds in my E. It would be great if I could know which of them would take which package. Naruto glanced around at the workers. Maybe they could be influenced by genjutsu, if I knew how to use any. Well, Iruka-sensei tried explaining it in class once, but we weren't paying attention. Kakashi, Sakura and Jiraiya also said about it before too. Try to remember, I'll help. Huh? Okay then. Naruto closed his eyes and focused on his past lessons in conversation. It was surprising how much he did remember, and how clear his memories were. He could remember almost exactly what they said, even if he wasn't paying attention back at the time. Throughout his life, a lot of people had talked about genjutsu, snippets here and there, but together they gave him an okay understanding on the subject. Didn't change the fact that he had zero practice in his control and understanding of chakra, while better, still wasn't ideal. The vivid memories of his friends saddened him. The clearer the memories were, the more painful they got. Not worth trying genjutsu now. They could sense it and the whole plan would be shot down. I should get some practice, and now isn't the time for that. I'd have a better shot somehow getting into their system to know more about their delivery times and patterns. Several hours later, Naruto indeed succeeded in gaining access to their computers through ninja shenanigans involving henges. He found out that the workers are all organized to take out deliveries every 30 minutes based on their specialty for the priority of the delivery. A disguised Naruto dragged each of the 3 boxes outside the shipping company's lobby with considerable effort. He made it seem like they were heavy for him and had a couple of workers help him bring them in. It is night now and he wore a backpack, his same trusty backpack that he had crossed the sea with, and that he had obtained when he first arrived. When they were all inside, he glanced around at all of them. The flow of devils had increased with dawn, and were a lot of people waiting. He ignored the lines and went straight up to the man. That seemed to be the manager, who was writing things down on a notebook. He seemed fairly built, wore oval glasses and had short black hair. Excuse me? Naruto asked the man, who took his eyes off his notebook to give Naruto attention. You're in charge here, right? I'm the manager, yes. How can I help you? The man tucked away his pen and Naruto glanced around nervously. Well, you see, is there a place we can talk more private? Naruto's shoulders were slightly hunched forward and his entire overall posture had changed into a submissive and nervous one. All to make the devil more comfortable, with the illusion of being in control over him and the entire situation. It's about those 3 crates over there, can we go now? The devil stared at him for a few seconds and nodded. Yeah, sure, this way. He led Naruto through a door and into a hallway, the itch on Naruto's arm intensifying as his urge to scratch it, but he did his best to remain calm to not alarm the devil. They both entered an office, presumably his office, which was rather bland, having a wooden table, 3 comfortable chairs, a bookshelf, compute and the usual office material. What is it that you'd like to discuss? Please hurry, I don't have much time. Right to the point, huh? You see, man, I was hired to get you guys these crates to have them delivered to this address. Naruto opened his backpack and pulled out a sheet of paper from it and handed it over. My employer said that it is urgent and that they need to be delivered with utmost discretion. She said that you guys are the best for this type of thing, yay? The devil carefully read the contents of the paper and then handed it back to Naruto. I'm sorry, you must be mistaking our company. We cannot help you, sir. Wait. Naruto called out to the disguised devil as he was at the door. My employer said that you might react like that. She gave me this to give it to you. Naruto reached into his backpack and paused for a few seconds as spiders crawled out of it and up his arms. He closed his eyes and grabbed something hard inside his backpack and placed it on the desk, then opened his eyes. The spiders were gone and he had pulled out a large, shiny golden bar, then pulled out 3 more. These are for the service, for them to be a priority and delivered fast. Naruto took out 3 more bars of gold and placed them on the table near the other bars. Kaguya had made the gold, their little secret, even Claria didn't know. As far as she was concerned, he would bill her on it after the mission. This is a bonus, for an extra incentive. What do you say? The devil turned back and eyed the golden bars. Claria had told him that her kind could be greedy. It seemed like this one certainly was a bit. He mentally debated on whether he should or not for a few seconds before smiling. I say, We of DevX are the fastest and most reliable delivery company there is. Your package will be delivered safely within the time frame of 24 hours. Well said. What should I do? Do I have to sign anything? In this case, you probably don't want that. I imagine you need discretion, right? Just leave it to me and I'll have them sent. The manager left the room with Naruto and guided him out. On the way, right before Naruto left the company, the manager gestures for a few workers to take the crates. It was a pleasure doing business with you, have no worry, your package is in good hands. Oh, I have no doubt. Naruto smiled, turned around and went down the street. Okay, they are taking the crates to the back. Alright, let's take a look at the situation. Naruto's inner self appeared on a dark alley, and Naruto entered it. We have a 40% chance that if they find out it is there now, they destroy the crates in there, no delays. In which case we need to hurry. 59% chance that they know it, ship it out and then intercept it in a more favorable place, and 1% chance that they don't realize anything. Since when we're good at math. Naruto looked at his inner self with a WTF face. He had a rough idea of the estimates and chances on his own, but nothing numerical. Come on, but the 95% of stuff that you don't notice and do without even realizing. Now come on, time is short. Outer, Naruto rolled his eyes. Naruto nodded to him and activated Obito's Mangekyu. He used the Kamui to sneak in the company and get to the back. Alright, they aren't going to destroy the crates, now, a good sign. Now where are those two? He scanned the area quickly and found two workers heading towards the bathrooms. One was bad, he was very large and fat, while the other was slim with short, light red hair. Hey man, you noticed? Fiona was eyeing you all day. The slimmer of the two said as they entered the bathroom. Who? The one from maintenance. The other replied, going to one of the toilets and unzipping his pants while his friend stayed to look at himself on the mirror. No dude, the blonde one from the East Wing. Word is it that she broke up with her boyfriend. Think you got a shot there, big guy. He washed his hands and straightened his hair. You think so? Her boyfriend was a real freak, don't think I want that kind of luggage. He flushed the toilet, zipped his pants and went to wash his hands. For sure man, gotta be careful. They dried their hands and stared at the mirror, under the impression that they saw something move behind them. Not finding anything, they both prepared to leave the bathroom. Gentlemen, a moment of your time. They heard from behind and were both tapped on the shoulders. There was nothing behind them when they turned around, but had they seen the mirror to their side, they would have seen Naruto chopped at both of their necks. Sorry fellas, you two will have to do. With that said, Naruto grabbed their bodies and sent them both to the Kamui dimension. His head throbbed and he closed Obito's eye. It should be getting easier to use with time, but the more he used the eye, the more painful it got. He tried healing it in his head, but nothing seemed to work. He closed the eye and leaned his back against the wall, then slowly slid down. 2 minutes should be enough. He rested his head on the wall and waited in silence for a short while, then got up, activated the eye and ejected the two men. They wheezed, coughed and then made themselves straight after a few seconds. Hey, let me guess, you're Claria and, you're Mana and Brian. Naruto pointed at the two and they nodded in sync. Hey, do I even want to know how you two are? Must be very uncomfortable. You took your time. How long were we in there? The disguised Claria asked while looking around the bathroom. Something around 15 hours, give or take. I told you guys it would take a while and that you should sleep if you could. Naruto shrugged and watched as the three stretched themselves. Okay then, what we need to do? The tall man said with Brian's voice. It was kind of odd for his voice was youthful and jovial. The plan is still mostly the same. Those two guys work on delivery. They should be making one now to the underworld. He opened the bathroom door and gestured for them to leave. You'll be going in their place. Kaguya will be following in the distance and back you up till you get to your cousin's place. They both walked to the door and Claria turned around right before leaving. And what will you be doing? Somebody has to go with the decoys. I also want to have a chat with the people after you. See what I'm dealing with. There are good chances of them appearing. No, you can't. They'll kill you if you go. I already told you that this is about protecting the status quo between heaven and hell. Look, I know that isn't all. I need to know what it is that I'm dealing with, and if you don't want to tell me, then it's fine, I will find out by myself. He pushed them through the door. Now go, the two guys you are in the body of, are scheduled to go out in around 2 hours. They usually help around and get tasked to go together for mid-priority deliveries to help. In the meantime, Help around others with their jobs and try to do what they would. Good luck. Naruto sighed and closed the door of the bathroom behind them. Chances were slim for them to take his package, for it should be leaving on a different time cycle than theirs, and a priority level off their grade. But the priority would depend on the intentions of the manager. If he want to send his best to try and get the job done, are cannon fodder to die on the job. His head ached and his vision blurred, and his ears buzzed. He felt like shit. His arms tingled and itched, beckoning for him to give that one little scratch. Come on, get it together. I need to do this part flawlessly. He grunted and peeked outside. There was a worker heading towards the bathroom and the crates were being loaded into an armored van. It's showtime. He used the kamui to phase through the floor and sneak his way underneath the van. He latched onto it at the bottom, closed his eye and waited for it to depart. Fortunately, nobody noticed him underneath it and he didn't have to wait long, just a handful of minutes. Unfortunately, the passage through the portal was harsh. It was a long kaleidoscopic tunnel void of air and gravity. Completely inhospitable. His henge dispersed and he wouldn't last much without using the 6-path sage mode. Thinking quickly, he used the kamui to phase inside the back of the van where 2 devils were inside, strapped to the wall. They were both surprised by his sudden appearance, and on a very unfavorable position. Naruto capitalized on those 2 things and quickly knocked them both unconscious, the last thing they both saw being the red glow of Obito's Mangekyo through the mask. Shortly after the van exited the portal and stabilized, presumably having arrived in the underworld, there were no windows to see the exterior, and no way that the driver suspected anything. The pain in his head, the ringing in his ears and the itching of his arms intensified more, but there was still no time to rest yet. He still had to get rid of the 2 devils that he knocked out, place them somewhere that wasn't inside the kamui dimension so they wouldn't get caught into the mess when the van was inevitably attacked. His solution was using the kamui to leave them behind in a way that the person driving didn't notice. For if he found out that something was wrong, then he would stop to see what was up, and Naruto needed him to stick to whatever course he was on. Afterwards, he sat down, closed his eye and rested. The pain slowly easing up, along with the itch and the buzzing on his ear. As the buzz receded, he felt as if he were hearing whispers, faint indiscernible sounds on the back of his mind, being muffled out by the blessed noise of the van's engine. He didn't want to know what it meant and what the whispers were saying. All he wanted was to rest, and rest he did, eventually falling into a nap on the floor, mostly unaffected by the rocky and unstable floor. A few hours later, the nap was interrupted as Naruto felt a large buildup of energy outside of the van. He made a hand sign and his hair changed to black behind the mask, held onto the wall with chakra and braced for an impact of some sort. The impact came from the sides, flipping the van into the air. It was struck 2 more times while still in the air, then sent downwards. The crates were firmly anchored to the ground of the van and so was Naruto to its wall. A rift in space appeared and sucked the door out. Naruto detached himself from the wall and walked out, Obito's eye in its Mangekyo stage. So many people just for little ol' me, I'm flattered. Naruto raised his hands and grinned beneath his orange spiral mask. He was surrounded by at least 20 devils of varying auras. He stood in front of a dented and ruined armored van. On the driver's seat there was a dead devil bleeding out to the floor. Inside the van there were 3 large crates. On one side there was a blond man seemingly in his 30s, wearing a very distinctive gold-trimmed red noble clothes, with 15 more devils behind him. On the other side there was a beautiful young woman with long, curly cherry blossom-colored hair, seemingly in her 20s, wearing a seductive dress with high slits. She had around 10 devils behind her. Their auras were the largest, and from their positions, they were probably the leaders. Step away from the van and I'll grant you a quick and painless death, the blond man said, and Naruto lowered his arms, an action which made them all tense. So jumpy. Naruto glanced around. What happens if I say no? Well, then it will be a real pity. I'm sure there's a handsome young man hiding beneath that mask. I can feel your vitality, it's exotic. The seductive woman gave a smile, not unlike Sai's usual fake ones. We just want the crates. There is some space in my peerage for another pet, if you be a good boy. Sorry lady, I don't think I'm fit to being anybody's pet. I'll take these crates to Dehauser territory and there is nothing you can do to stop me. Naruto smiled beneath the mask and the devils charged their magical attacks, lifted their swords and prepared themselves. The blond man in specific seemed especially furious. This ends now. Indeed it does, kill him. The blond man ordered and 2 men stepped forward from his side, dark blades filled with energy appearing on their hands. Naruto stayed still and waited for them to attack, which they did, one going to swipe his midsection while the other backed him up for whatever evasion Naruto would do. While he was still, he was gathering natural energy, which seemed very different in the underworld, not that he had time to be picky about it. When the first swordsman came near him, he just about entered Sage mode, and he raised his right palm to intercept the blade. It shattered in contact and he continued to punch the devil, striking him on stomach and sending him flying backwards at the other one and being dragged back to their leaders. All in the span of 2 seconds. Naruto then pulled a kunai from inside his cloak and flicked it at the leader, to gauge his reaction, and right as it reached him, a hole opened in space and it went through. Not a second later, Naruto's instincts beckoned him to dodge and he stepped to the side. The same kunai that he threw struck the ground where he once stood. Whoa, that was dangerous. What was that, some type of space technique? I got to watch out with what I throw at him from now on. Naruto thought and made a cross hand sign, and then 6 masked copies of him appeared. I got to be careful with him. Ooh, now that's a fun trick. The curly-haired woman licked her lips and the copies launched themselves at her peerage and the blonde man's peerage. 4 clones for her and her peerage, 2 for the other, while Naruto went for the blonde man. Every step had to be calculated for any moment the devil could open a hole or do something. Through the Sharingan he anticipated that the man would punch, but from the distance it shouldn't reach him. A portal opened in front of his fist to Naruto's face, but the masked, blonde senjutsu-enhanced reflexes kicked in and he dodged the punch and kept running. Portals opened around and in front of Naruto as he ran, beneath his feet, directly in front of him, trying to swallow him, but he avoided every single one of them by the hair of his arms. When he reached the devil he cocked his fist backwards as if preparing a punch. A portal opened in front of the devil, and Naruto disappeared in a burst of speed, leaving an after-image behind to enter the portal in his place. A millisecond later he reappeared behind the devil and kicked him to his own portal. Meanwhile the clones fought and held back the remaining devils, blurring around the battlefield and keeping everybody away from the main Naruto. It was surprising how coordinated they were, the Sharingan helping them to not get in each other's way and fight in total sync. Although they weren't doing much damage and the curly-haired woman was dispatching them one after the other. Wherever it was that the portal sent the devil, it was far, for he completely vanished from Naruto's senses. Naruto looked around, made a cross sign and created 10 more clones, 7 to help the ones that were already fighting and 3 to stay with him and wait for the devil to return. They didn't have to wait much for after a few seconds one of the 3 clones popped courtesy of a demonic aura-covered fist. The remaining 2 jumped backwards and he appeared through a portal, punching the space where they stood. Both Narutos took out kunais and imbued them with wind chakra. For some reason, the wind was dark, but they paid no mind to it and launched themselves at him. They had to keep moving, otherwise they would be easy targets. He coated himself with demonic magic and warped away as they reached him, coming out to the side of one of the Narutos with a punch aimed to its ribs, which he parried with the flat of the wind blade, then jumped away just as a hole appeared where he was. Were he not quick on his feet, then it would have sent him far away. Meanwhile the other Naruto went around and tried to cut him with the kunai, but he warped away right in time to appear directly in front of him, crouched slightly and going after Naruto's leg. He failed to dodge and the devil chopped it off. Naruto screamed in frustration and glowed, then exploded. Stop playing around biddies, let's just end this. The woman yelled from the sidelines as she threw a ball of energy at Naruto, who had his back turned to her. The devil, now identified as Biddies, had protected himself from the explosion with a portal, was a few meters away from Naruto. He was closing the portal just as the very fast bolt neared Naruto's back. However, instead of it exploding on him as expected, it phased through him, kept on going towards Biddies, who wasn't fast enough to reopen the hole. The blast destroyed the small, closing portal and caused a massive explosion. The remaining clones took the distraction of the explosion to kill or maim many of the devils by slicing body parts such as heads, arms and waist with wind-coated kunais. Naruto created a dozen more clones and sent them to the remaining devils. It was a massacre. Their morale was low and their numbers were quickly dwindling, while the clones went straight for the kill with any given opportunity. There were about 9 devils remaining altogether from both sides when the smoke receded, counting the curly-haired woman. With the smoke gone, it was revealed that Biddies was still standing with his arms crossed, the upper half of his clothing blown away while his skin was badly burned. His dark energy flared and he charged at Naruto, going through a portal and appearing besides him, magic-covered fists ready to tear a hole through Naruto's chest. But his punch was sidestepped, and as Naruto was about to slash him on the back, he warped away. Naruto felt him coming from behind, and instead of trying to dodge, he reached for his mask and slid it to the side, revealing Sasuke's Rinnegan. Everything happened too quickly for anything to be done. The tomos spun in slow motion as Badez's hand reached Naruto's back, but just as it was about to hit, Naruto vanished and was replaced with the curly-haired woman. She coughed blood as his fist went through her stomach. 1 second she was staring at them, the other she was looking back at the masked man, who was standing where she once stood, followed by a searing pain. A rock beside Badez erupted in smoke, and from it appeared a Naruto, swiping at his chest with a dark wind kunai, while the original covered the Rinnegan beneath the mask. Both Badez and the woman fell to the ground, bleeding profusely from their wounds, their remaining peerage ceasing to fight and surrendering upon their defeat. I told you that this ended now. Naruto walked to the dying devils and crouched in front of them. Strong devils like you terrorizing a weak girl, you should be ashamed of yourselves. Fuck you. Badez spat blood on Naruto's feet. On the ground besides Badez there was a severed arm still holding a long black sword. Naruto pried the fingers from the sword and picked it up. Wait, no, don't kill me, I can pay you. Money, land, anything. Naruto's hands sank into their bodies and pulled out red king chess pieces. Their overall magical aura and reserves shrank tremendously after he removed the piece, and they wouldn't last much longer. Don't you think it is humorous that you guys lost everything for nothing? What are you talking? The woman asked, and Naruto stood up, then turned his back to them and began walking to the destroyed van. How about you see for yourselves? He pulled out the crates from the van and clapped his hands 3 times. They opened up to reveal Rick Astley posters and radios. Never gonna give you up, never gonna let you down. Never gonna run around and desert you, never gonna make you cry. Never gonna say goodbye, never gonna tell a lie and hurt you. The devils opened and closed their mouths as the radio went on. The song was Brian's idea, he has an odd sense of humor. Claria and her peerage are probably in Dehauser's place by now. Naruto walked back to the 2 devils who tried and failed to get back on their feet. Naruto plunged the sword through his heart, the blade sinking into the ground below, all the way to the hilt, killing him instantly. Then he turned to the woman. You don't need to kill me, I can help. She struggled and crawled to his feet, not being killed. She felt that he was waiting for her to continue. I'm Roygun, you should know me. Badez wanted to kill Claria because she found out about the king piece, but he wasn't who ordered. If you kill me then you can't clear her name. Take me to Dehauser, I'll come clean, I'll say everything, I promise. A devil wanting to come clean, and promising, how ironic. Naruto stopped to think about it, and one of the devils that had surrendered, ran to him with a sword. He turned around and saw it, a female devil. She was very beautiful. Her face was the spitting image of Shizune's, but her hair was long and messy. She shoved the sword through his chest, his blood spraying and falling on Roygun's face, who was just behind him. The devil was about to try and yank the sword in him out, when he grabbed her wrist with his right hand, then her throat with his left hand. She was crying, possibly from the death of her master and friends. For some reason, Naruto felt no sympathy for her. How brave, and foolish. He lifted her to his eye level and crushed her wrist, forcing her to let go of the hilt. Obito's Mangekyu spinning hypnotically. He pulled out the sword from his chest with his free hand and shoved it through her heart, then watched as she breathed her last breath and the light faded from her eyes. He felt numb, uncaring. He didn't care about whether she was a living being or not, she had to die, it was as simple as that. He had read somewhere that when taking enemy soldiers hostage, he had to break their wills and make them give up hope so that they don't fight back, use an example if he must. He dropped the corpse on the ground and his wound closed. You better be speaking the truth, I'll take you to Dehauser. I could end here, but this part was necessary to be on this chapter still. Dehauser's territory was very extensive, only slightly smaller than the Gremory's household, having mountains, farms, lakes and lots of villages, cities and industries. The place was well treated, there wasn't much poverty. Dehauser took care of his people. They had to be careful because it was still possible and very much probable that there were devils waiting for them inside. Which there were, plenty, but they were no issue for Kaguya. Every now and then as they walked, some devil would recognize Claria and attack, but Kaguya would instantly kill them with her sharpened hair needles. To say the least, Dehauser was surprised when they finally arrived in his castle. He had Claria and her peerage brought to the main living room on the ground floor for them to explain what had happened. which is where we find them now, on couches with a small table in the middle. The place was very fancy and furnished. The walls, like the entire castle, was filled with books and tomes of all sorts. Dehauser's worthlessness required him to study and know about a spell for it to be nullified, so he was constantly researching. And that is what happened. Naruto helped us get to the underworld and went as a diversion while Kaguya escorted us here. Claria finished explaining and Dehauser nodded. A maid brought in tea and lunch and left it on the table. I see. You did well coming here, you are safe here. Dehauser looked at Kaguya. She was exotic. She stopped hiding her horns as soon as they arrived in the underworld, with the variety of devils and demons roaming. You and your partner are mercenaries. I don't think I have enough wealth to pay for what you have done for my beloved cousin, and it has been a long day. You should stay and rest. Tomorrow we can discuss some type of payment. I will stay, for I gave Naruto my word that I would watch her until he found me. Kaguya replied in a monotone voice, taking a sip of the tea. Well, you can stay here for as long as you'd like. Dehauser looked at Claria and smiled. He loved his cousin dearly, more than anything that he had. Kaguya nodded and then tilted her head to the side. Oh, he's here, on the garden. We should go greet him then, before somebody mistakes him for an intruder. Dehauser got up and led the way to the garden. It didn't take long for them to arrive and find Dehauser's queen, a noble-looking woman with long purple hair, pointing magical circles at the masked Naruto. In her defense, Naruto's hands, feet and cloak were drenched in blood. Kaguya didn't need to activate her Byakugan to sense him. He was the only other person with her type of chakra on the world. Although it was hard to recognize it, he was in sage mode and his chakra signature was cold and sinister, even darker than her own. Stand down, he is our guest. Dehauser ordered his queen and joined her along with Kaguya and the others. When Kaguya appeared in sight, Naruto deactivated sage mode, his aura changing from cold and sinister to gloomy and sad. You must be Dehauser. Naruto glanced at the man and then at Claria. The Sharingan was unnerving to stare at. Claria preferred when he just used shades. I'm glad that you ate well. Me too, I was worried that you were captured. Claria approached him and examined him for wounds. His cloak was torn and trimmed on a few edges, but he seemed unharmed. What happened? The delivery was intercepted as predicted. There were many, around 30. I can drop them here, but it will be messy. Naruto glanced around at Claria and the others. Dehauser looked at them, and they all nodded. We can handle it. Claria prepared herself. Do it. Dehauser commanded and the Mangekyu spun and space distorted around his eyes. Then he began to eject on the floor corpses and bodies of every devil he captured or killed. There were many of them indeed. Their bodies covered the garden's floor. Decapitated heads, armless and legless corpses upper halves. Some moved and groaned, signaling that they were alive. Dehauser, his queen and Claria recognized two of them instantly. It was a strong sighting, not for those of weak stomachs. Brian and Claria were having a hard time while Mana and the rest were more used to death. Dehauser's queen was still on edge about Naruto. Roygun Belphegor and Badiz Abaddon in their peerages. Dehauser inspected them. So they were a part of this too, huh? You defeated them, alone? Very impressive. Dehauser was surprised. This Naruto person took on 2 entire peerages by himself, and not just any peerage, the second and third strongest and highest ranking ones, while remaining unharmed. That was no small feat. Do you know them? She is still alive. She agreed to talk and help. I'm tired. Can we continue this later? I want to take a bath and sleep. Naruto deactivated the Mangekyu and sighed. Of course yes. Dehauser glanced at his cousin and noticed her discomfort. Claria, go with them, you should rest too. The room on the end of the eastern hallway is empty for surprise family visits. I will stay here and get this organized and sorted. Yes, let's go Naruto, Kaguya. Claria turned away, she was turning green and was in a hurry to leave the garden. This way. They left the garden. It was a long day, except maybe Kaguya. They were all tired and ready to take a hot bath and call it a day. Not a word was spoken between them on the way up to the room. The castle was enormous. The first and second floor were the servants' rooms, kitchen. Claria's room was on the top floor, where Dehauser's peerage and the devil himself stayed. This is your room, Claria said as they arrived. Our room is on the northern wing, the one with a pink door if you need anything. I'm sure he would just call a maid if he needs something. Brian began but quietly stopped as Claria glared at him. Boot, who's to say really, we are good company too, good to pass time, you know, I'll be quiet. Claria cleared her throat and Mana elbowed him on the ribs. Naruto, I can't thank you enough for all that you've done, you too Kaguya. We wouldn't have gotten here without you. I should stop bothering you too now. She turned around along with Mana, who dragged Brian with her and out of the hallway. Claria glanced back at him a few times as she left, but didn't say anything else. It wasn't the adoration that she was used to, or wanted, but Kaguya was satisfied. And once they were out of normal eyesight, the two entered their room. It was fancy and large, but Naruto could hardly care about those details. All that he wanted was to take a bath and sleep, maybe even sleep on a bathtub. He went straight through a door in the room, that he presumed to be the bathroom. When he got in, he came face to face with a large mirror. And through it he saw himself, wearing an orange mask, with Obito's eye, black hair and covered in blood. What's becoming of me? He thought and approached the mirror, then took off the mask. His face looked tired, and pale as if he hadn't slept in days. He stared at himself for a few seconds and ceased to flow chakra through his hair to make it black. He turned the sink's water valve and began washing his hands, but the blood wouldn't go away. Memories of the devil woman that stabbed him came back. He murdered her, he remembered it as clear as the day. He remembered thinking that it was the right thing to do, and he remembered doing it, but he felt nothing. He shoved a sword through her heart and watched as she gave her last breath, and he felt absolutely nothing. Why didn't he feel anything back then? It was like he was an entirely different person. Could it have been the senjutsu? The blood wouldn't come off his hands, and the buzzing in his ears increased. He tried harder to remove it, and the harder he tried, the more disorientated he got. Wherever he looked he saw blood, he couldn't escape. And then it all went black, with Kaguya a few moments earlier. While Naruto had went to the bathroom, she took a seat on the bed and analyzed the room. It was very fancy, a different type compared to when she was a princess, but nonetheless aesthetically pleasant. The bed was very comfortable as well. She made a mental note to herself to get one just like it later for their home. Still, something felt wrong. She activated her Byakugan and watched Naruto in the bathroom. It is getting worse, she thought as he began move around erratically. She'd known that he was in turmoil since she had first seen him after he transplanted the eyes. Maybe it is about time I do something. She opened the bathroom door and found him looking around with an insane expression. She knew what insanity looked like. She had seen herself in the mirror on her darker days, even if she hadn't noticed at the time. Naruto didn't seem to notice her entering the bathroom. It was as if he had no awareness of his surroundings. So he didn't notice when she reached for the back of his neck and pinched. Kaguya caught him as he fell unconscious. What should I do? She deactivated her Byakugan and glanced at the tub. I should take him to the bed, but first I should clean him. She removed his clothes and placed him on the tub, then turned on the water. Cleaning him reminded her of when Hagoromo and Hamura were babies and the troubles that they caused her, even if there was a substantial difference between Naruto and her sons when they were infants. If his mind continues to worsen, then he will become a nuisance. If he became a rock in her path, then she would have to take his chakra to continue with the mission by herself. I can't let it come to that point. I need him. She placed her hand on his forehead, activated her Byakugan and opened her Rinne Sharingan. Representation of inside of Naruto's head. Kaguya appeared floating above a village. It was night and the city was on fire and falling apart. The village was fairly large. There were giant rock statues on each of the four corners of it, with different faces, and a large oval structure on the center. The floor was black and white like a chessboard, and there seemed to be small black and white things moving around. She floated down to get a closer look and noticed that the moving black and white things were creatures. They resembled blank dolls with no remarkable faces, like a child's drawing. They were incredibly simple, had 2 dots for eyes and a line for mouth, no ears, and their limbs had no fingers. They wore vibrant orange jumpsuits. What's happening? Kaguya floated around. The creatures were putting off the fires, repairing the houses, and building more. They didn't seem to notice her. One of the black ones walked through Kaguya's stomach as if she weren't there. The structures must be his brain, and these creatures his body's attempt at repairing. Cute. They reminded her of Zetsu's, but cuter. Every person has different manifestations for their inner mind and soul. This is unlike any I have seen. They are in complete synchronization and much more active. Could this be why he is so efficient? Kaguya observed as the creatures rebuilt houses, working together as a well-oiled machine. The damage is forcing his mind to evolve and adapt. What is in the dome? She floated towards the dome on the center of the city and entered it. Inside were a bunch of monitors passing by different scenes, and on the middle was Naruto. His body flickered with orange energy and electric currents, every time changing the direction that he faced. as if teleporting on the same spot. He turned to Kaguya's direction and blinked, then all of the screens paused. Huh, what you doing here? You were going crazy, I want to know what is wrong. Kaguya answered and he nodded, then teleported in front of her. That's easy, have you seen this place? It was much worse before lights out, was raining fire, thunder and a bunch of the good stuff. It always gets worse the more we use the eyes. Should be fine by morning, till we begin using the eyes again. He shrugged and glanced around at the monitors. You staying long? I got things to sort in here. I am just about leaving, but first, how are you awake in here? I knocked him unconscious, so this place shouldn't be this active. Kaguya told him and he rubbed his chin. So it was you that shut us down. Thanks for that, things were getting out of hand. He gave her a weak smile, he seemed tired. I'm his subconscious. I'm always awake in here, organizing this place, making sure we don't fall apart, that type of thing. You're his subconsciousness. That explains so much. She had never seen a subconscious so active as the one in front of her, even if it was just a manifestation and representation. Most subconscious were slow, the difference between a turtle and a cheetah. It suddenly made sense why he was so efficient lately. It is what I said, alpha personality calls us his outer self, when we manifest ourselves outside, for irony purposes, but we are his inner side. Now can you leave, we have a lot of work to do. He seemed anxious and nervous of her presence. Very well, is there anything I can do to help? Well, when he is asleep we get some progress in fixing him. So if you want to help, then you can watch over our body and make sure nobody wakes us up. You can help with that type of thing, just leave the rest to us. Very well. Real-world Kaguya finished cleaning and drying him up, then laid him down on the bed. She wasn't sure on how to feel, she wanted to help him for their mutual benefit, but she couldn't. It bothered her. She spent the night beside him on the bed, observing him sleep. The end. Thank you for watching guys.